Nobody likes job interviews. They waste a lot of time, and they waste a lot of company time. Every hour you spend in an interview, the company must pay the person interviewing you. So why the f is it becoming so common for profit-driven companies to ask for multiple rounds of interviews for even the most basic of jobs, when most of the time they are just going to ghost you anyway?
Competing against a smaller pool of people. Now you only have maybe 3 or 4 of the people you are fighting to win the job.
Scheduling interviews, sometimes those interviews have got multiple rounds, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 rounds of interview.
If you spend any time looking for a job in today's job market, you probably realize how broken most major corporations' hiring processes are.
Filling a position is an expensive process that companies are only making more expensive for themselves. Some companies sit down with hundreds of people through as many as 17 rounds of interviews. That's hundreds of man-hours spent finding one person for one job, when just 20 years ago, it was rare to do more than 2 rounds of interviews. According to a report by the Harvard Business Review, this trend is also leading to worse outcomes for employers. High-performing employees are pulling out of job applications after being asked to come back for round after round of interviews, so companies are being left with only the most desperate applicants that are willing to jump through their hoops. This is wasting people's time, costing businesses lots of money, and creating worse outcomes for everyone. But there are 4 reasons why businesses don't care and will probably keep increasing the number of interviews they make new applicants do. The first reason is that it increases their leverage in the negotiating process. According to a report by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it now takes the average person 24 weeks to go through the hiring and interview process to get into a new job. If you are unemployed and looking for a new job, then after 24 weeks of interviews, you are going to be desperate to accept anything, and you won't risk losing the offer by negotiating a better salary or benefits.
That's smart.
If you do have a job, this strategy can still work for you. A current employer is only going to be so patient about you taking time off to attend interviews, so going through this process once will be hard enough. So you take the job, or stay at your current employer that is angry at you for missing so many days. According to the same report, the number one reason that people turned down a new job was because the offered wage was too low, and in 2023, people are also turning down jobs that don't offer work-from-home flexibility.
About a third of the managers want employees to return in order to monitor them. Then about a quarter of those managers want employees to return to ensure that they take shorter breaks.
Respondents were much more likely to overlook this, though, if they had gone through an extended hiring process. Employees are also less likely to leave a company if they believe it was a real challenge to secure their job in the first place, so management can use a difficult interview process as a staff retention technique before people even become staff. Psychologists call this the sunk cost fallacy. If you have already spent so much time pursuing a job opportunity, you don't want it to be a waste by not accepting it if you get an offer. Hiring managers just call it an effective negotiation technique. For the employers, this is a calculated expense. The hours that they need to pay HR and a hiring manager to sit in an interview room will be paid for by forcing you to accept a lower starting salary for your entire career with that company. Other companies and hiring managers are not this smart, but getting the upper hand over your pay and benefits is just the first reason. The second reason that companies have started to ask you to come in for multiple interviews is because they think it will magically make them a better company. Most business managers do not read workforce surveys from the Harvard Business Review. They only hear about companies like Google, Meta, and Apple requiring multiple rounds of interviews for even so much as a summer internship. Roles in big tech require a lot of hard skills, and because they offer such competitive salaries, benefits, and career opportunities, they have far more applications than jobs to give out. Google received 3 million job applications in 2021 and hired only 7,000 people. A former senior vice president of product management with Google told CNBC that, quote, hiring took 6 to 9 months and people sat for 15 to 25 interviews. It was an awful experience. That's a quote from the person that did the hiring, so it's even more stressful for the people that are seeking a job. Google and other large tech companies need to do this, though, so they get the best employees from the huge list of applicants they receive. A single good developer could make the company hundreds of millions of dollars, and a single weak developer could cost just as much.
What we're doing as a consequence of being in this period is we're being very deliberate on our hiring. That means we're continuing to hire, but not everywhere in the company are we hiring.
Engineers at these companies can also make 7 figures a year before they are 30, so even the most outstanding applicants are willing to jump through multiple rounds of interviews because there is nowhere else that they can reliably earn this much money. In my own personal experience, I did 10 interviews with the firm that offered me a job as an investment banking associate. Each interview covered something different, so there were clear meetings to test financial technical skills, another for market knowledge, and I had a one-on-one meeting with an MD to test interpersonal skills, and a panel with senior bankers so that I could ask my own questions. For these jobs, firms both have a greater need to interview candidates rigorously, and they get away with doing it because they will pay successful applicants life-changing amounts of money. Regular managers at regular companies interviewing for regular jobs with regular salaries have ignored those details and just seen that prestigious companies that everybody wants to be like have lots of interviews, so they should have lots of interviews too. The third reason that you are being forced to do so many job interviews is that it's not their time they are wasting. Hiring managers and HR departments rarely have any direct ownership of the business they are hiring for, and they get paid for the time they spend doing interviews. If they can fill up their own calendars with interviews, they can even justify to their own managers that they need additional manpower on their teams to share the workload. A bad hire can also be detrimental to the business and make the actual job of the managers in charge of hiring a subordinate much harder on a daily basis.
Leaders want these very elaborate hiring processes just so that if it goes south, there's blame to go around.
The cost benefit is clear to managers looking out for their own interests. They need to be extremely careful about who they hire, and if that takes a long time, then so be it. Managers assume safety in numbers. If they do lots of interviews, they will filter out bad potential hires, but it doesn't work. Some people are just better at interviewing than others, and apart from roles like sales or team management, there isn't any overlap between interview skills and job performance. You may have noticed that this has only become worse as companies have started relying on recruitment agencies to fill more jobs. Third-party job recruiters make their money by placing candidates they find with companies they sell their services to. The hiring company will pay the recruiter a commission for every role they fill, usually paid out in 3 stages. One when an applicant first takes the job, a second at 6 months, and a third once the applicant has been with the company for a full year.
You win!
According to an industry report produced by LinkedIn, the demand for recruitment services has increased by over 25% since the start of the pandemic, as companies have had to adapt to a changing job market and the changes that came with online interviews. The hiring manager for a company looking to fill a role doesn't actually pay the recruiter until they hire someone, so they have an opposing incentive. The recruiter wants to fill the job as quickly as possible with someone who is just good enough to hold the job for 12 months, and the hiring manager wants to sample as many candidates as possible before taking the risk of hiring someone and paying a commission. Good recruiters will normally interview candidates before they recommend them to one of their clients that's looking for a new employee. So the rising popularity of recruiting firms means that you are likely to end up doing at least one extra interview when you start looking for your next job. The fourth reason that you need to sit through so many job interviews is because a lot of companies want a reason to reject you. The US Department of Labor mandates that before an immigrant can be offered a job in America, the company employing them has made every effort to ensure that the admission of foreign workers to work in the United States on a permanent or temporary basis will not adversely affect the job opportunities, wages, and working conditions of American workers. This is not a "they took our jobs" thing. Sometimes companies will want a foreign worker because they are the best person for the job, but the only way to offer them a role is to show that they made every effort to hire an American first, and the same goes in other countries as well. More often than foreign workers, companies just want to hire internal candidates or people they already know, but company policy dictates that they must advertise the role externally. Unfortunately for you, that at least once in your career, you are going to go through a series of interviews where the company just needs to tick a box before they give the job to the person they wanted to in the first place. This is also the reason why most of the time, if you are unsuccessful applying for a job, you just get ghosted. If a company gives any reason for not hiring you over someone else, there is the potential that they expose themselves to legal liability. If they say nothing, they are safe. In the past 12 months, the job market has been defined by trends and buzzwords like the Great Resignation, quiet quitting, quiet hiring, quiet firing, rage applying, loud quitting, and my new personal favorite, resenteeism. Most of these all meant the same thing. Nobody knew what the f*** was going on. And that is the fourth reason why companies started to love doing multiple rounds of job interviews. It let them hedge their bets on the future. Companies simultaneously didn't have enough talent and also had too many employees. Announcing layoffs or hiring freezes sent a bad message to investors and existing employees, especially in businesses where a portion of employee compensation is paid out in company stock options. As a way to force employees to stay loyal, tech and finance companies pay big bonuses, but they pay them as restricted stock units, shortened to RSUs, that the employees are not allowed to sell for a period of time. The industry average is 2 years. If the employee leaves the company before their RSUs are released, they lose them. So anytime an employee quits, they will be giving up 2 years' worth of bonuses that they have already earned. Psychosocially, people are much more motivated by loss than gain, so restricted stock is a great way to force staff loyalty. It's a scummy tactic, but normally these bonus structures are only given to employees that are very valuable to their companies and are already making a lot of money. Other companies also offer signing bonuses to compensate new hires that they poach from their competition for the RSUs that they will never be able to cash. Time stock bonuses only work when a company's workforce thinks that those options will be worth anything once they are allowed to sell them. If a company stops hiring, that's a good sign to everybody that they are no longer growing. And if a company is not growing, its shares are not going to be worth as much to the employees waiting to cash them out, so it becomes a good time to leave. Even if companies are not trying to avoid scrutiny, a long hiring process is a good strategy to see if the role was really needed at all. If someone quits, their work can be delegated to their coworkers on a temporary basis. If the company takes a few months to hire a replacement, they can assess if tasks are still getting completed by the team with a lower headcount. If they are, they just cancel the job search. If they are not, they can just pick from one of the candidates that they have running through multiple rounds of interviews and is desperate to accept any job they get offered. The bonus reason that companies are making you do so many job interviews is because they know that even if they don't end up hiring many people, just the act of looking like a job creator can lend them significant political influence. There are 9.6 million job openings in America right now, and businesses are desperate to fill roles that have now been empty for months. But at the same time, you are reading endless articles about people who have applied to thousands of jobs and haven't heard anything back from companies that were supposed to be desperate for workers. So if there are so many job opportunities, then why can't anybody get a job?
But now a new report shows that some employers are spending millions just to tell people
restaurants
we're hiring.
and different stores are offering incentives to get people hired because they are forced to close.
We've featured is desperate
just not
to
enough
hire
workers to meet all the jobs here.
According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are currently 9.6 million job openings in America and only 6.5 million unemployed people. So why not just take the openings that desperately need workers and give them to the people that desperately need jobs? Well, it's not that simple, and there are 2 reasons why companies are struggling to fill roles even when so many people are looking for a job. And 2 equally important reasons why people can't find a job even when so many companies are looking for workers. The first reason why people can't find jobs even when companies have so many open positions is because it's easier for a company to look desperate than it is for a human to. According to the Congressional Research Service, the number of job openings is calculated using a survey of 20,000 business establishments on the last day of the month to assess if a job opening exists. According to the informational guidelines, a job opening only has to meet 3 criteria to be counted. First, a specific position exists and there is work available for that position. Second, the job could start within 30 days. And third, the establishment is actively recruiting outside workers. There are companies that are constantly advertising job openings for positions that are hard to fill or are subject to high turnover. Last year, Engadget, a technology newspaper, received a leaked internal report from Amazon which revealed that the company had a staff turnover rate of 150%. That means Amazon, which has 1.6 million employees, was hiring 2.4 million people every year just to maintain its workforce. In the same year, only 1/3 of Amazon's new hires stayed with the company for longer than 90 days before quitting, getting fired, or getting laid off. With that much turnover, the company doesn't bother to remove job listings once someone gets hired to fill a role. Warehouse staff are continuously being onboarded and offboarded at almost the same rate, so hundreds of thousands of positions stay open across the country. Amazon's turnover figures were bad, but other large employers like big box retailers, delivery companies, and warehouses use the same job advertising process. These posts are mainly for low-skilled positions with equally low pay. But even if you are someone looking for a position with higher prerequisites, these numbers can still be deceiving. Amazon's hiring practices for some of their best paid and most attractive job opportunities also showed how easy it was for job opening numbers to paint the wrong picture. Another Amazon internal document reviewed by Business Insider revealed that the company's web services utility computing team posted 25,000 job openings in 2022, but only 7,800 of these positions were actually approved to be filled. This also happened in a year that Amazon was laying off more staff than they were hiring. The strategy that these companies and hiring managers are using is to constantly have positions open to attract top talent. If anybody that is not overqualified for these positions applies to them, they just get rejected. Amazon is not the only company that does this. Most of the top tech, finance, and consulting companies do exactly the same thing. Amazon is just not as good as keeping internal documents from the press. As private companies, they are not doing anything illegal, and they only do it because it does work. But it makes the number of job openings you hear companies complaining about in the media very inaccurate.
Affectionately known as JOLTS, number 9,610,000, that best estimates, and it is the best level going back to May when it was slightly higher at 9,616,000.
Compare that to the number of people looking for work. Job openings outnumbered unemployed people, but the gap is shrinking, and it's much easier to count a job opening than count as unemployed. The 6.5 million people unemployed only get counted if they do not have a job, have actively looked for work in the prior 4 weeks, and are currently available for work. According to data published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are an additional 5.4 million people who want a job but are not counted as unemployed because they don't meet these technical requirements. So even though you might think it's the best time ever to get a job, the numbers are misleading, and that's just the first reason. There are much bigger problems than just the numbers. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why, with so many job openings, people still can't find a job. If you have been lucky enough to secure it full-time, working from home will have radically reshaped your career in more ways than you realize. Full-time working from home means that you can find lucrative job opportunities anywhere, and companies that want to keep up in the job market need to play catch-up. One strategy that has become common is to post the same job in every major city, so there's more chances for applicants across the country to see it, which lets the company be more selective with who they hire since they don't need to come into the office anyway. This can be a win-win for the employer and the employee. But for someone looking for a job, it can make it look like there are a lot more opportunities than there really are. And that's the second reason why nobody can find a job, even when companies are apparently desperate to hire anybody. People are chasing ghost jobs. The job market is in a really weird place right now. People are unwilling to accept lousy salaries after being spoiled for the last 3 years, and companies are not willing to pay as much as they were because they can't. Major companies overhired during the pandemic and are now getting pressure from their investors to cut headcount and only focus on revenue-generating projects. According to a study conducted by the Harvard Business Review, this turmoil has increased the number of ghost jobs, which are jobs that are advertised that companies have no intention of ever filling. Companies do this for 3 reasons. The first is to just build up a database of talent. In the information age, having lots of data about thousands of workers in your industry is worth millions of dollars. If you are a hiring manager and a position in your company ever does really need to be filled, you can just go to your database of people that have previously applied for a job and start calling the most promising applicants. You might have to poach people from their current job if they did end up finding work, but that can still be cheaper than starting a search from scratch after the company realizes it needs a position filled. It's also useful business intelligence that is close to free to collect. By slowly sponging up thousands of applicants to do jobs that don't exist, the company can get insights on how many staff their competitors have, how much they are paying them, how many of them are leaving, and what skills they have and do not have. For the price of a job post on LinkedIn and Indeed, it's a lot of information. According to a survey of 1,000 hiring managers conducted by Clarify Capital, more than 60% of job postings have been active for more than 2 months, despite 96% of employees claiming they're actively trying to fill an open role quickly in the job advertisement. Posting ghost jobs is also used by managers who don't want to pay more for employees, but want to keep their existing overworked employees happy with the promise that new team members will be starting as soon as they find the right person. Posting ghost jobs also looks good to investors and customers because it looks like the business is growing even when it's not. It's a super effective management strategy for business, but it means job hunters can spend hundreds of hours applying for jobs and attending interviews for roles that never really existed. Now, it's much harder to feel sorry for them, but companies have become a victim of this new career paradigm as well. The first reason that companies can no longer find workers, even though millions of Americans are looking for a job, is because they have made it pointless to hire the right people. Businesses have embraced new technologies that have made it easier than ever to train people for a new role. A job like a pharmacist or bank manager used to be highly respected positions that required decades of experience and paid as well as doctors and lawyers. A pharmacist needed to know compounding formulas for prescriptions, and a bank manager needed to make discretionary decisions about who to lend money to. These were big jobs that could cost lots of money or worse if not done right. Once a company found people that were good at the jobs, it was very important to keep them for as long as possible. So it wasn't unusual for people to spend their entire career with just one company and be rewarded handsomely for it. Today, pharmacists are just there for compliance and to pull pre-made scripts the computer tells them to. Bank managers use credit scores and computer algorithms to approve or deny loans. They personally have no say in whether you get a home loan or not. This made their jobs easier, but it also made them easier to replace. So companies stopped valuing company loyalty, and they stopped rewarding it. Now it's people that don't switch jobs that are being left behind. People that switch jobs every 2 years or more, on average, earn 50% more than their peers that stay loyal to a company. The result is that people have learned to switch jobs more often. But now, companies do not want to invest any money into training new employees because they know they are not likely to stay around for very long. If companies don't want to pay for training, they need to hire people that are already skilled enough to do the role they are hiring for, but that can be hard to find. A lot of employees today are being forced to take it upon themselves to seek out skills and qualifications to remain employable through things like Excel courses, coding boot camps, sales trainings, and now AI seminars. This is on top of a growing number of jobs that now require advanced college degrees like an MBA for an entry-level analyst role. If companies can keep their standards high and still fill the roles they need, then they will win by not having to pay for staff training. If they can't, then they still win because they get to complain about how it's too hard to find workers with the right skills. Some companies can use this to justify outsourcing or hired skilled H-1B visa workers which depend on their employer to stay in America. If people working in America on an H-1B visa lose their job, they only have 60 days to find a new job at another company that is willing to sponsor their visa before they get deported. So companies have an incentive to make it look like they can't find anybody with the right skills so they can hire workers which are much more dependent on their job. It's a broken system that's bad for American workers and bad for visa holders, but it's great for companies that want loyal workers while everybody is shopping around for better deals. One thing that you have to remember about this whole situation is that companies do not want to admit that they can't find enough staff unless there is something in it for them. Signaling to investors that growth or operations could be hurt by personnel challenges will hurt a company's stock price. So a CEO has a fiduciary duty to keep that sort of information discreet, unless it can be used to benefit the company some other way. The second reason why companies can't get anybody to work for them, even when everybody wants a job, is because more skilled people than ever are choosing to work for themselves. Over 5 million businesses were created in America last year, up from just 3.5 million before the pandemic. There are more opportunities than ever to work for yourself thanks to platforms like Etsy, Amazon, eBay, Uber, Fiverr, and YouTube. These businesses are risky, but more people than ever are willing to take that risk if it means they don't have to sit through 10 job interviews for a position that didn't exist in the first place. But there was one online marketplace that started this all. LinkedIn is one of the strangest social media platforms in existence. Where else can you find people bragging about working unpaid overtime and writing appreciation posts to the company that just laid them off? It's a really weird website. But is it hurting your career?
I learned the value of, if it's good for the company, then it's good for me. There are so many values I learned while working at this company. Hashtag proud to be unemployed.
LinkedIn is a strange place where people talk at length about how great they are at their job to look enticing to potential future employers.
LinkedIn to me is like this weird cesspool of corporate culture that feels like corporate culture, but from the perspective of its high school.
In 2006, when the company was founded, it was a strange concept, but it has worked for LinkedIn, which is now the 9th largest social media platform in the world. It had more monthly users than Twitter before both sites were acquired. Elon Musk and a team of investors purchased Twitter for $44 billion in October 2022, a record sum for a social media company being taken private. Musk's controversial purchase beat LinkedIn's record from 2016 when it was taken private by Microsoft for $26.2 billion. Musk is often criticized for overpaying for Twitter when LinkedIn is the comparison. At the time of acquisition, LinkedIn had slightly more monthly users than Twitter, but also had something that the Bluebird just couldn't match. Every time you log into LinkedIn, you are giving Microsoft something unmatched by every other social media network in existence: value. If you are using a service for free, you are the product, and LinkedIn users are the most valuable product of them all. LinkedIn generated revenue of $13.8 billion in 2022, which is 2.5 times higher than Twitter's highest year of revenue ever. We don't have public financials on it now since it's a private company, but most analysts expect that Twitter's revenue is down since Musk's acquisition. The average LinkedIn user is worth 76 times more than the average Reddit user, 35 times more than the average Pinterest user, 4 times as much as the average YouTube viewer, and 3 times as much as the average Facebook user. This comparison is not 100% fair either. Users who log onto Reddit, Pinterest, YouTube, or Facebook spend a lot more time on the platform on average. Additionally, a site like YouTube is much more expensive to operate than LinkedIn, given the inherent differences in the cost of hosting HD videos and hosting content that is just text and pictures. LinkedIn is able to extract revenue from their users at the highest rate per hour in the industry, and when you are the product, that value is coming from you. LinkedIn achieves this in 4 ways. The first is by creating a digital marketplace for people. LinkedIn is the biggest job search site in the world. Companies and recruiters can post job listings and boost their visibility by paying LinkedIn directly. When you apply for a job through LinkedIn, the employer gets your skills, experience, education, and employment history on display in a consistent format, which is a big advantage over normal job search sites like Indeed. This information should be on your resume, but the standardized way that LinkedIn presents it lets recruiters automate their candidate searches far more easily. A subscription to LinkedIn Recruiter costs $9,000 a year, but it offers hiring managers and third-party recruiters a range of tools to search for candidates based on criteria, reach out to them directly, and advertise new roles. It's a small price to pay for most companies, because what they get in return is a buffet of potential applicants for their jobs. When you ask for a raise and give your manager the ultimatum of quitting, they weight up the expense of giving you a raise with the expense of replacing you. Finding qualified candidates used to be much harder than it is today, but now, if you quit, they are just a few keywords away from finding a perfect replacement from the largest collection of career-focused people in the world. Hiring managers would not pay $9,000 a year for tools that didn't provide a return on investment. Having the tools to reach out to potential applicants that aren't even actively looking for a job has given hiring managers a lot of power over you. And that's just the first reason. The second way LinkedIn is ruining your career is by creating an imbalance of information between you and potential employers.
LinkedIn is actually one of those things that's becoming more and more required, more and more requested on every single job application, and that is a big problem. And the main reason is LinkedIn just makes it way too easy to give too much information about yourself.
A good LinkedIn profile should have all of the information an employer would ever want to know about you. But company pages don't have any of the information you really want to know about a potential employer. Salary information is often not shared, and job expectations are kept as vague as every other site. LinkedIn is giving companies a database of employee information for nothing in return. There are some careers that require a higher level of sacrifice than others, and you should know that before going into them. If you want to work as a corporate lawyer or investment banker, you need to accept that you will need to put in long weeks and have little personal time in the first few years of your career. The same sacrifices are made by doctors who suffer through years of medical school and residency, but in exchange, they get a career path with a certainty of high compensation. It's not fair that you be expected to work like these people if you don't have the opportunity to make the same money as them. And that's the third way that LinkedIn is ruining your career, which is also one of the company's most lucrative revenue streams. It forces self-comparison. It's well known that overconsumption of social media is bad for your mental health, because it forces you to compare your everyday self with carefully curated posts by friends and influencers at their very best. Instagram will make you self-conscious about not hitting the gym for 3 hours every day, but LinkedIn will make you self-conscious about your career. Career coaches recommend that you make as many connections on LinkedIn as possible because it expands your network and makes your profile more visible. I personally have over 1,000 connections on LinkedIn from my time in investment banking, because in the last years of my career, connecting on LinkedIn became more common than handing over a business card. My feed is now filled every day with thinly disguised brags about how someone became the youngest partner ever at their law firm, or someone else was thankful to have the honor to coordinate the synergistic digitization sprint for internal tools development, enabling their company to pivot to fields of disruptive innovation while empowering the customer experience. According to the company's own data, only 1% of monthly users post anything on the site, compared to around 20% of users who make at least one post a month on Facebook. People don't post their bad hair days on Facebook, and they won't post their career failures on LinkedIn, which can give you, as an observer, the impression that everybody is doing much better than you are.
And who can blame them? I mean, everybody on LinkedIn is essentially a saint, according to them.
LinkedIn and the marketing teams that leverage the platform know that this insecurity is one of the best ways to sell products. If you are feeling insecure about your career, you are going to be more receptive to ads selling services like career development training, leads generation, or job recruitment. You are also going to be more willing to spend money on a product that could increase your career earnings because it becomes easy to rationalize as an investment in yourself. According to Insider Intelligence, who runs an annual survey of 15,000 respondents, LinkedIn ranks highly among social media platforms that Americans trust most. It was in the top spot for 4 years straight, but just got edged out by Pinterest. The company's branding of being a professional place where professionals discuss professional things helps this reputation, even though it still takes advantage of the same human emotions to sell advertising space as every other social media site. That's not actually the problem though. As a YouTuber, I am sympathetic to the fact that a company in the market for attention needs to monetize that attention to run a sustainable business. LinkedIn attracts a niche valuable audience with high intent, and they should charge what people are offering to pay for impressions. LinkedIn vets advertisers more rigorously than other platforms like Meta's Ad Manager or Google AdSense. The problem that this actually creates for your career is that it forces you to think that you need to add more achievements to your page in order to stand out. According to the market research database Grandview Research, the American personal development market is worth $12 billion and expected to grow at a rate of 4.1% over the next 8 years. People are spending more of their money and unpaid hours to collect certifications like they are Pokemon gym badges. Recruiters and hiring managers love this trend because they are paid to put people in roles, and the performance of a new hire once they are in the job doesn't matter to them. Convincing the manager that will actually be responsible for the new hire is much easier when they have a long list of certifications to point out. There is no evidence to suggest that career development training has any correlation with job performance, and on the contrary, people that seek out meaningless tokens to boost their employability are more likely to switch jobs more often. LinkedIn didn't create this problem, but it did make it much worse, and unfortunately, that's what you have to compete with now. The 1% of people who actually post on LinkedIn also set the standard for working unpaid overtime, putting a job first, and blurring the lines between professional and personal domains. They do it to show off and increase their chances of getting a job, but since it's the only thing that gets displayed on the world's largest professional network, companies and managers start to think it's a normal expectation. The fourth way that LinkedIn is ruining your career is by creating a culture of corporate worship. Since posts on LinkedIn are not anonymous and people want to keep their jobs, any post that mentions a company is going to be overwhelmingly positive. Some companies strongly suggest that their staff have a strong presence on LinkedIn because they know it can help their image as a desirable employer. Corporate worship is not just weird, it can hurt your career. Big companies make it very easy for people to believe that they are doing something bigger than just exchanging their time and skills for money. Companies have been doing this for a long time before LinkedIn. Walmart employees have to recite their company cheer every morning because it helps with staff retention, but LinkedIn has enabled companies to push this kind of cringe corporate worship into the mainstream. The overwhelmingly positive feedback that LinkedIn gives companies also makes them less likely to acknowledge areas of weakness in their organization. Praise from identified members of a team is much easier for managers to address than criticism from an anonymous forum. Many don't stop to think that they aren't going to get negative feedback from people who just want to advance their careers. And that's the worst part. In most professional industries, not having a LinkedIn profile is seen as strange and unprofessional. For some companies, it can immediately disqualify you as a candidate. Recruitment agencies that specialize in tech and finance have publicly said that people without a LinkedIn account don't take their career seriously enough to be considered for jobs. So even though that everybody that uses the platform knows it's a giant corporate circle jerk, they need to play along to get the most out of their career. One of the most alarming trends to come from LinkedIn recently followed the wave of tech layoffs where ex-employees wrote appreciation posts about the companies that just fired them. The employees didn't do it because they were grateful for the skills and experience they gained from their time with the company. They did it because it was the most corporate-friendly way to announce they were looking for a new job. These posts benefited the company more than the laid-off employees, but if it gave these employees even a slightly better chance of finding a new job quickly, many were willing to put their dignity aside and play along, which is something that they will probably be doing for the rest of their lives. Stop me if you've heard this one before. An entry-level job paying $8 an hour with no benefits at an unremarkable company. Oh, and they want you to have at least 3 years experience in a similar role and preferably a master's degree. Why the f*** are entry-level jobs not entry-level anymore?
The latest jobs report found widespread hiring.
One man's quest to find a job is raising questions about the labor shortage right now. He says he applied to more than 60 entry-level positions.
Particularly strong in hospitality, leisure, and healthcare.
We have created more jobs in 2 years than any presidential term.
Searching for a job is a difficult and time-consuming task. Most Americans do not have enough savings to survive for more than 2 weeks without going into debt, which means it is also stressful. No matter how efficient the hiring process is made, you are never going to have fun looking for a job, and nothing can change that. But the corporate world has introduced a lot of obstacles that make the job of finding a job as painful as possible. Filling out online forms for information already on your resume, going through multiple rounds of interviews, and getting ghosted by hiring managers for hundreds of positions is enough to drive anybody mad.
Responded to me. 4 of those went on to a phone call after an email exchange, and then 1 of those turned into an interview. 0 of them turned into a job that was actually desperate for help.
It's also simply bad business. Attracting the right talent is vital for business success. If businesses make their application process too difficult, they are going to filter out everybody but the most desperate candidates, which are rarely the best candidates. Companies that ask for multiple years of experience from applicants applying for entry-level jobs also expose themselves to a similar risk. It might sound advantageous for the business to get an employee with years of experience that they can pay like a fresh graduate, but company management frequently overlooks the reason that these applicants are looking for entry-level jobs in a field they have been working in for years, and it's that they are not that good at their job and they need to keep moving companies before their poor performance catches up with them. A recent study conducted by Portland State University and published by the Harvard Business Review found that overqualified candidates did not outperform the control group, and that paying significantly under market rates for talent will cost most businesses more in other areas. Bloated hiring processes are also expensive. Sponsored job postings on sites like Indeed, LinkedIn, and Glassdoor can cost hundreds of dollars per day, easily more than the successful applicant will be paid once they are on board and working. Multiple rounds of interviews also take paid hours from HR, hiring managers, and third-party recruiters. Recruiters work on a commission basis for successfully placed candidates. But if a company makes candidates go through multiple rounds of interviews, the recruiters can ask for a higher fee, or they will be incentivized to send their best recruits to companies that have a simple hiring process so they can get paid quickly and reliably. It's bad business, and good company managers know it, but there are 3 reasons why they still do it anyway. The first reason is that it's become too easy to apply for a job. Indeed has 60 million monthly users, and LinkedIn has over 200 million. Online job boards make it easy for applicants to apply for hundreds of jobs every day based on convenient filters that let them search results by industry, seniority, experience, and salary range. Companies can get several thousand applications for a single position, because the optimal job search strategy has become spamming your resume into as many positions that vaguely fit the description of the job you are looking for. Companies have attempted to adapt to this by having landing pages where users can fill in their details into the company's own database by manually completing an online form. These forms typically ask for information that should be included on any good resume, but it enters it in a way that can be read by a computer instead of being read by a hiring manager, saving them the time of manually going through thousands of applications by hand to find the attributes they are looking for in a candidate. The backend of these forms will enable the hiring manager to search through the candidates by a similar set of filters that the candidates themselves use to find the job posting, evening the arms race between the volume of applications and the people that check those applications.
You're quantifying human behavior, human expressions, human voices, turning that into data.
We're now using artificial intelligence to help companies find the very best talent.
Some companies have started using application tracking systems, or ATS, which use AI to scrape resumes for keywords to populate databases that can be filtered in the same way without requiring candidates to fill in a data entry form themselves.
And most likely you were being analyzed by an algorithm. How does that make you feel?
I feel like that would blindside me entirely.
This practice has become so common that there are now AI tools like Getty, JobScan, and Rezi that check resumes against job posts and make sure that they are appealing to the AI system that check resumes before the hiring manager does. So, an AI will write a resume to satisfy another AI to stand out against thousands of other applications also written and checked by AI. Applying for a job has become easier than when you had to search the classifieds and call companies one at a time. But this means people can apply for more jobs. More applications means that the acceptance rate at each job is much lower. And the best way to deal with this low acceptance rate is to apply for more jobs, which means that applying for a job has become harder all over again. Nobody is to blame for this new paradigm. I love making fun of dumb corporate decisions on this channel, but in this case, they are just reacting to new technology that has made finding applicants easier than ever, and everybody else is reacting to the same thing. The competitive meta of job searching has shifted from a firm handshake to mass spamming resumes to get past increasingly difficult spam filters. But that's just one reason, and there are plenty of things that companies are doing which are just dumb. The second reason that companies have made it so difficult to apply for jobs is because they want to cover their ass. There are lots of reasons why a hiring manager might want to pick one job applicant over another, but not all of them are legal. And even if they don't violate any equal opportunity laws, some might be a bad look for the company. By listing lots of unreasonable job requirements, the company increases the likelihood that no applicant will tick every box, which means they can hire whomever they want and cover themselves by saying all of the other candidates were missing one or more of the role's prerequisites. It's rare that companies get much pushback over rejecting an external candidate. Most people have just become accustomed to never hearing back from a majority of jobs they apply for. If you have ever applied for a job recently, you will know that no response is the new rejection letter.
First time.
If companies do respond, they try to keep it as generic as possible so that they do not expose themselves to any potential unfair hiring practice lawsuits, which makes the long list of job requirements redundant. Where these do help companies, though, is in rejecting internal hires. According to a study by Cornell University, internal hires outperformed outside hires, but only because they are more familiar with the business from day one, requiring less training to get into a new role, and because they were more likely to stay in a job longer than the outside hire. A similar study by McKinsey Consulting found that a strong culture of internal promotions helped with staff retention and encouraged staff to work harder to qualify because they could see it paying off for them.
The pandemic, a lot of companies are not flush financially, so they can't afford to hire a new person.
Internal promotions are effective, but they are also more difficult than outside hires. If you get promoted or moved around within your company, then someone else needs to be hired to fill your role. And if someone gets promoted to fill your role, then HR has to fill 3 positions instead of just 1, which is expensive, difficult, and triples the chance that someone won't be able to perform their new job. People hired internally also don't have probationary periods, so if they do underperform in their new role, they are harder to let go. Internal hires have advantages, but external hires are easier and present less risk. If a company has no strong internal candidates for a new role, but it doesn't want to lose the benefits that come from occasionally promoting people from within, then the most effective strategy for them is to increase the job requirements so they can tell their existing staff that, unfortunately, they don't qualify based on the job's criteria. I know I say it a lot, but this is another reason why the best thing you can do in your career in your early years is to consistently apply for new jobs that are better than the one you currently have. Workers that change their jobs every 2 years earn on average 50% more than their colleagues who show loyalty to a company. Sticking around might get you a promotion, but there's no way to know how long it will take for other people to move out of their positions. Having experience at different companies is also more valuable to new employers than long-term tenure at a single employer. When employers ask for 3 years' experience, they are often satisfied with candidates that talk about dealing with similar challenges in different industries. So you should apply anyway and just have some kind of experience to talk about, even if it's not doing the same job or even a job at all. And that's the third reason why employers make job requirements that are so out of touch with the job they are offering. They want to see how applicants deal with the challenge. There is an old saying in business that even if you are not in sales, you are in sales. Most people do not have jobs that require cold calling a list of leads to generate revenue, but those soft skills are still important in every job. Dealing with difficult customers, difficult coworkers, being able to present a strong argument, or simply showing empathy for a client's needs are all skills that can be demonstrated by an applicant when they are questioned about a shortcoming of their qualifications against the job requirements. If you're in a job interview and can provide a strong response to a question like this that eases the interviewer's concerns without disregarding them, you will probably end up doing better than someone who didn't even have that experience gap. If you can deal with an interviewer's concerns, then you have clearly demonstrated that you can deal with the other challenges as they are presented to you, a skill that is worth more than anything you can write down on a resume. And that's the fourth reason. Some managers do know what makes a good hire, but most don't. People are promoted into management positions based off having experience in a subordinate role. Managers are therefore naturally inclined to believe that when it comes to hiring someone, more experience is more better. It's a reasonable assumption that someone that has practice in a role should be better than someone with no practice. In fact, I said it at the beginning of this video and you probably just accepted it. But corporate roles in non-technical fields change so rapidly today that the benefit is negligible. A 30-year-old study conducted by the Internal Congress of Applied Psychology in Madrid found no strong correlation between experience and job performance. Since this study was published, follow-up studies including a publication from the Harvard Business Review in 2019 found the same thing. Most corporate managers do not read journal articles about statistical correlations between hiring parameters and job performance. Most go off their own experience, which is the value of experience. They do the same for other job requirements because the safest move for them is to find a candidate that ticks the most boxes. Experience can help a business, but so can new ideas. And neither is more valuable than the other. Corporate America has just lost one of the most powerful tools to keep people from getting better jobs. Non-compete agreements that ban workers from finding a better job have been used to keep wages low. And even if you have never personally signed one of these agreements, they will almost certainly still be hurting you. Late last month, the FTC banned these deals from being put into contract for most employees, and most existing non-competes will be phased out over the next 3 months. Unless you run a business that relies on keeping employees in bad conditions for poor pay, this ruling will be good for you. But that doesn't mean that corporate America is going down without a fight.
Welcome back. The Federal Trade Commission has just voted to ban almost all non-compete agreements between companies and their employees. That new ban also applies to any existing non-compete agreements.
Hey, Tony, good morning. The Federal Trade Commission wants to make it easier for you to get a new
proposed
job.
Final rule that would, in effect, ban most businesses from using non-compete clauses in hiring.
A non-compete clause is a condition in a contract which bans an employee from working for another company for some amount of time after they quit or get fired from their current position. Companies claim that these terms were very important because they didn't want to spend their time and money training staff and giving them proprietary information just for them to get a job with their competitor and take all that valuable information over to them. To play devil's advocate, for some employees, this kind of makes sense. High-level company executives, R&D staff, and even sales staff might have company information that would be valuable to a competitor and detrimental to their business if they got out. If the CFO at a company got a job at a competitor and they knew that their old company was having cash flow problems, their new company could use that information to run them out of business. Sales staff could also call up all of their client list and bring them over to a new company since they know the exact details of deals they were getting with their old company. Spoiler alert for a 20-year-old show, but Michael Scott wouldn't have been able to start Michael Scott Paper Company, which nearly put his old employer out of business, if he had signed a non-compete agreement. Scott knew his old clients and how much they were paying for their paper, so he was able to undercut his old company by calling them up and giving them a better deal. This was good for the customers and good for healthy competition, but it wasn't good for the large incumbent Dunder Mifflin, who got outcompeted by a smaller, more efficient operation. Businesses have argued that they can't operate if they have no legal means to protect their valuable information. They have also said that without non-compete agreements, their competitors could free ride off them by just poaching their staff after they have made the investment into hiring and training inexperienced workers. The Federal Trade Commission and its controversial new chair, Lena Khan, have basically called this out as complete bullshit. In their announcement of a stop of non-compete agreements being put into employment contracts, the FTC also said that even if this does hurt some big businesses, that's actually a good thing. The free rider argument really doesn't work because those businesses could also attract their own talent from their competitors too. All they need to do is give their employees a more attractive job offer, and most people are happy to switch jobs. If people do take company information with them, the FTC argues that the only group this is bad for is a company that doesn't want to compete. Companies also don't need non-competes to protect themselves from people taking their intellectual property. Patent, trademark, and industry secret laws already exist, and non-disclosure agreements where previous employees can't legally disclose information about their previous employers are still totally enforceable. Dunder Mifflin was a work of fiction, but many real companies are forced to offer better services at better prices and pay their employees more competitive salaries, because an ex-employee of theirs learned about their industry and started a better firm with the experience they gained working for their old employer. Most successful companies are started by people who were previously employees working for a company in the same industry. Gary Tan, the CEO of Y Combinator, an early-stage startup incubator, has said that the best companies he deals with are ones started by people who first gained experience in the industry they want to disrupt by working in it. The Federal Trade Commission estimated in the report that this new rule will lead to the formation of at least 8,500 extra businesses every year and between 17,000 and 29,000 new patents every year. According to the organization's research, these are all being blocked because people aren't legally allowed to innovate or start a business. The only people that lose in this situation are the companies that don't want to compete, which is why it's the FTC, not the Department of Labor, that made this ruling. The FTC is normally the organization in charge of making sure that businesses aren't forming monopolies. It does this by blocking mergers or acquisitions that would give the new mega corporations too much power. In the last 3 years, the FTC has been trying their best to stop some large company mergers, but they have so far lost all of their recent cases in court, allowing the mergers to go ahead. The FTC can also break up companies that have too much market power, but it hasn't done that in over 40 years. So what the FTC really does most of the time is make rulings like non-compete agreements being a form of anti-competitive practice, which is illegal. You wouldn't think that this would be a hard case for them to make, since the words non-compete are right there in the name. But the FTC is already being sued over this ruling by an industry body representing companies. But let's be honest with one another. Even though the companies and the FTC won't admit it, non-compete agreements were never about competition between one company and another. It was about competition between a company and its employees. The real reason that non-compete agreements have become such a big issue in America is because they are not being used as they were originally intended. Stifling innovation and making it illegal for talented people to start competing companies was already pretty bad, but companies just started using these contracts to trap their employees in bad jobs. According to research done by S&P Market Intelligence on 67,000 workers, 1 in 6 service workers in the fast food industry had a non-compete agreement as part of their contract. Fast food workers have no valuable company information, and they don't pose a threat to revenue. Nobody is going to stop eating at Five Guys and go to Chick-fil-A just because Freddy the Fry Guy changed jobs. What it does, though, is make it very hard for minimum wage workers to find another job that they have experience for. So even if they could earn more, or if they are being asked to work unfair conditions, they can't quit because they are not allowed to work anywhere else. Giving fast food managers that much power over minimum wage staff has not only cut down on wage growth for the people that need it the most, according to the FTC, it's also created unsafe working conditions, enabled wage theft, and made career advancement slower because nobody dares to complain. Workers making lower incomes were also found to be the ones least likely to argue against the inclusion of non-compete agreements in their contracts because they were afraid that they would lose a job offer they desperately needed at the time. It might sound bad locking people with the least negotiating power into bad jobs they can't escape from, but non-competes have actually been used to control a group that gets even worse than this. A report by Johns Hopkins University found that 45% of vital healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, and support staff are employed under a non-compete agreement. Doctors are required by law to share any information pertaining to their patient's health with other licensed providers, provided the patient provides consent, and training is based on industry standards. So the only reason that hospitals are doing this is to lock in the staff they have at a time where there is a desperate shortage of medical workers in the country. Doctors practicing in a hospital are highly likely to start their own practice as part of their natural career progression. A non-compete can potentially stop that, making clients go through the hospital to deal with the doctor of their choice. That's not only bad for doctors and nurses who could find better jobs or start their own business, it's bad for you. The FTC estimates that providing more competition in the medical industry and encouraging more businesses with less overhead to enter the market, medical costs can be reduced by as much as $194 billion over the next decade. Now, even if you aren't under a non-compete agreement, these deals are pushing down market rates for most jobs, especially those in industries with a lot of worker competition. The FTC estimates that typical workers will earn an additional $524 a year after this change, whether or not they had a non-compete in place. It should also make finding a job easier because companies won't be able to hold their employees captive in their positions, which means they will need to hire more often. That's really what companies are angry about, even if they won't say it out loud. But don't get too excited yet, because these companies still have a few loopholes to fight back with. Most non-compete agreements would be extremely hard to enforce already, but for a minimum wage employee between jobs, the threat of expensive legal action with big fancy sounding contracts was enough to keep them in line. Companies will easily be able to find other conditions that achieve the same thing. Already, 95% of employees who have a non-compete agreement in their contract also have a non-disclosure agreement in their contract, which employers could use to make the same kinds of threats. The FTC warned employers that make non-disclosure agreements so broad that it would prevent their employees from getting another job that it will be counted as the same kind of non-competitive practice. But that still requires a regular employee to file a legal complaint against their employer, which, let's be honest, not many people are going to do. Companies could also do something even more sinister and make contracts with each other in so-called non-poach agreements that cut out the need for any formal agreement with employees at all. According to the legal firm Schneider Wallace, a no-poaching agreement is when 2 or more companies come to an agreement to limit hiring of each other's employees. The agreement is to not poach employees of the other firm in exchange for the same not happening to their employees. These agreements are usually deemed anti-competitive and illegal, but they are incredibly hard to find, especially in industries like fast food, where handshake deals can be made between local franchise owners. Even if these practices are investigated, the fines to settle the case are usually less than the cost of paying employees competitive local rates, so it can be written off as the cost of doing business. Companies can also maintain any non-compete agreements they have with senior executive level staff. Just to make sure that every company in America didn't conveniently promote all of their staff to the level of senior executive cashier, the rule only applies to staff that earn over $150,000 in the previous year and who are in genuine policy-making positions. Employers can't add new non-compete agreements to these employees, but they are allowed to keep the existing ones in place, which means if the ruling is enforced, eventually someone is going to be the last person in America working under a non-compete agreement. But that's if all of this actually happens. The FTC can make rulings about what it's going to enforce, but it's still up to the courts to decide what is legal or not according to the law. The FTC has unsurprisingly already been sued by the US Chamber of Commerce and a few other businesses around the country that are arguing that this ruling is not legal according to any existing federal law. The FTC has been on a bit of a losing streak with its big legal battles. So while this ruling is definitely worth celebrating, businesses still have a hope of getting their way. Jobs are not what they used to be. The average time an employee spends with their company is now at the lowest level ever, and that's by design. We have gone from full-time to part-time to casual to gig work, lowering the expectation of a long-term professional relationship every step of the way. If this didn't do enough, studies have shown that many workplaces are now intentionally promoting the fear of job losses in an attempt to motivate workers and keep costs down. But this is usually a really dumb idea. The death of job security is bad for workers and bad for companies, but nobody cares anymore.
So we have immediately seen, Andrew, layoffs. We have seen price increases, so that's inflation.
Teachers and staff at schools from coast to coast could soon be out of the job.
15 million new jobs in just 3 years, a record.
Mr. Musk said the company would look to reduce headcount by around 10%.
The layoffs are already piling up this year, and we're just a few weeks into 2024.
Up until the 1980s, it wasn't unusual for workers to spend their entire professional careers working with just one company. Company loyalty was highly valued by both employers and employees, and the threat of getting laid off or fired was incredibly low. If you ever watch old films and see someone getting fired as a major plot point, just remember it actually was a big deal back then.
Third prize is you're fired.
But according to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, those days are long gone. The average tenure of young employees these days is less than a third of the baby boomers exiting the workforce. I don't want to sound too old here, but back in my day, people actually cared about losing their job. But today, getting fired or laid off from your company just makes good content to post on TikTok. This is a bad trend for companies, because it takes away their biggest stick. The fear of getting fired is always going to be a motivator in the workplace. There really is no way around that. If you don't do your job or cause too much trouble for the company, you are going to lose your job along with the pay and benefits that come with it. But as the great Peter Gibbons would say, that will only make someone work just hard enough to not get fired. The death of job security means that people just expect to lose their job at some point in their career these days. But there are 3 big reasons why it was allowed to get this bad, and 3 reasons why nobody really cares anymore. The first reason is that companies give up on training their own staff. There is an old joke about company staffing that goes something like this. The CEO and head of HR are arguing about the cost to train staff. The CEO asks, "What would happen if we spent all this money and they quit?" To which the head of HR responds, "What happened if we don't spend the money and they stay?" But as more people move jobs more often, the CEO's argument is actually starting to make sense. Research conducted by Peter Capelli, the director of the Wharton School's Center for Human Resources, found that the time and money spent on staff training within companies has fallen drastically. In 1979, the average worker received 2.5 weeks on the job training every single year. By 2004, it was just 11 hours, and most of that was safety training, not developing new skills. A more recent follow-up survey conducted by the same team in 2011 found that only 1/5 of workers received any on-the-job training at all within the last year. Companies don't want to train people because they are leaving their jobs more frequently than they used to, so they are only willing to hire employees that are already able to do the job. Standardized systems have made this a lot easier for them to do. If you are a professional office worker, it's almost a prerequisite to have a basic proficiency in Microsoft Office, especially Excel. And every profession now has its own industry standard productivity programs. If you are a creative, you use Adobe Suite. If you are in sales, you use HubSpot or a comparable CRM. And if you're in marketing, you need to know your way around a box of crayons. Oh, and the advertising analytics backend of Google, Meta, and LinkedIn. Since these skills have become the standard for all employees, companies can hire people that are already ready to work on day one. where in the past they would need a lengthy training program on the unique in-house systems of that particular company. But standardized programs have also meant that people can find a new job that they are qualified for with less barriers, which means they switch jobs more often, which means companies invest less into training unloyal staff, which creates even more need for industry standard systems. The ultimate incarnation of this trend is platform-based gig work. The professional relationship for this kind of work lasts as long as the app is running, and writers often work between multiple apps at the same time to maximize earning and minimize downtime. If you want to get ahead in a professional career these days, I'm sorry to tell you, but you are going to have to invest some of your own time and money into training yourself, even if it's just to tick a meaningless qualification box. Companies aren't going to train you anymore, which means if you quit or get laid off, it's not as big of a deal for either party. But the decline of on-job training is just the first reason. The death of job security is bad news for companies, even if they were the ones that caused it. The simple fact is that when you get a new job, you aren't going to be very good at what you do until you learn your new role. Standardized systems have made it easier to transfer basic competencies between companies, but even little things like who you talk to about authorizing your expense reports, the names and faces of clients, or how the office printer works, they all take time for new people to learn. According to a study conducted by Gallup, a business analytics company, it takes the average employee 12 months before they reach their full performance potential in their new role. Other studies have suggested that new employees are not fully autonomous in their responsibilities for the first 18 months of their employment. If new entrants into the job market are only spending 3 years in their jobs on average, that means they are going to be spending a third of their career just getting up to speed in their new role. That means a loss in productivity for the companies they work for, right? Wrong. Worker productivity is actually at all-time highs, so that begs the question, is this in spite of lower job security or because of it? The second reason that job security has been dying is that it's a great motivation tool. If the fear of losing your job is only enough to motivate you to do the bare minimum to avoid that tap on the shoulder, then you should know that companies have responded by moving those goalposts. A study conducted by economists at Manchester and Cardiff University looked at the motivating factor of what they called manufactured job uncertainty. In this report, researchers tried to work out why fears of job security was going up, even when the rates of people being fired from full-time positions was stable. They did this by comparing companies in America and the UK, who are very happy to lay people off to appease shareholders, to companies in Japan, which has a strong culture of never firing people. A small tangent, but Japanese businesses actually take firing people so seriously that they have an alternative practice called oidashibeya, but this loosely translates to workers' purgatory. According to Japan Intercultural Consulting, a firm that advises businesses operating in the Japanese market, workers' purgatory happens when an employee chronically underperforms in their role. Instead of getting fired, they are typically placed in a room, often windowless, where they have nothing to do. In many cases, their business cards are taken away, and they are forced to do menial, mind-numbing tasks or given nothing to do at all. So yeah, Japanese companies would rather put their workers in solitary confinement than fire them, making them a pretty good contrast to companies in America and the UK. What the economists found was that even when job tenure wasn't actually being reduced by layoffs or firings, changes to corporate control and especially company mergers or acquisitions raised uncertainty. Companies noticed that by hyping up this uncertainty and making workers compete against each other to maintain their position in a theoretical downsizing, they could get people to work harder. Companies doing this would rank the performance of their teams and compare them to one another, highlight staff errors, and downplay strong performers so that managers and their teams always felt like their job was at risk. The Japanese firms, despite actually having shorter tenures for managers and operating with more business uncertainty thanks to a weaker overall economy, had a higher sense of job security, mainly thanks to a culture of protecting workers even at the expense of shareholders. In a wonderful twist of fate, though, the study also found that this is not really working on younger employees. Decades of well-publicized layoffs means that younger managers have no expectation of job security and aren't afraid of losing their jobs as much as older managers who come from a time when people could spend their entire careers with one company. The rank and yank strategy only works to boost productivity for so long. A company should get rid of bad employees, but if it makes everybody feel on edge about their jobs forever, then even the best employees are just going to look for better opportunities elsewhere. Younger workers have also realized that changing jobs more frequently, especially early in their career, is the best way to move up the corporate ladder and secure pay increases. I will say it in every video I can, but if you want to increase your earnings in your career, multiple studies suggest that the best way to do this is to change jobs roughly every 2 years, and always be on the lookout for better opportunities. Companies do not value staff loyalty anymore, because they can't. And that's the third reason why job security is dying. It costs businesses a lot of money to hire new employees, and then more money to pay them while they're getting good at their job. If they are hiring externally for a more senior position, they will also need to pay that new hire more than an internal promotion. So if it makes no sense, then why do companies keep doing this? Well, it's easier. An internal promotion means someone else needs to be promoted to fill that person's position, and someone else needs to be promoted to fill theirs. Now, instead of your company having one employee in a new job, it has 5. Hiring managers could do this, or they could just hire an external candidate that already knows the systems and then get back to scrolling Reddit in their office. Workers also don't believe in job stability either. Things like employee pension plans and career development are all the responsibility of the worker now. And if they are accepting that responsibility, they also want the freedom that comes with it. Some companies like consulting, legal, and accounting firms have built their entire workforce around limited-time employees. Overworked, underpaid graduates will stick it out in entry-level roles because they know it looks good on the resume when they apply for a real job in 2 years. Companies can attract high-performing workers by bragging about how secure they are. Even companies that were considered American institutions have fallen apart too many times for people to think that their job is secure. And job security isn't a selling point worth taking a job for because people have learned not to care. So, congratulations, corporate America, you kind of played yourself. There's so much more I want to say on this topic, but it wouldn't make for a good YouTube video. For things like that, make sure you're subscribed to my totally free email newsletter Compounded Daily if you want to get articles that can't be made into videos. The bonus 4th reason that job security is dead is this man right here. Go and watch my new video to find out how an unremarkable chemical engineer worked his way up to personally reshape corporate America into what it is today, all while destroying his company in the process, to keep on learning how money works.